Let's enter into maybe the last section of this conversation, and one that I think is needed because it's easy to talk about problems out there, but it's also good to talk about just how this issue relates to our experience here at Johnson Ferry. You all have been here for a number of years, much longer than I have, and a lot of people watching have been here a number of years. But let's just talk a little bit about Johnson Ferry as it relates to issues of racial tension. First of all, just briefly, I'd like to hear maybe from some of you what led you to come to Johnson Ferry, and maybe more importantly, why did you stay at Johnson Ferry?
That's the more important question. Why did we say? What led us to come here is back in 2011, we were living in Tennessee, and I knew that coming to Atlanta was a possibility, and so we started looking for churches, and so did a wide search across lots of denominations. I was looking at other denominations. My wife, she was only looking at the Baptist ones. She was in Baptist churches for a long time. For me, this is the first Baptist church I ever came to, and so there was a lot of trepidation. Long story there for me in that regard. But we settled on a couple of churches before we even got to Atlanta. Visited Johnson Ferry the second week we were here. The second week we had the opportunity, and we've been here ever since. We got plugged into a Sunday Bible study and started to form community and really started to feel at home. Certainly the missions aspect of the church was something that was very important for us. My wife was a former journeyman IMB missionary, and so that was a draw for us as well, and we've been blessed to be able to get involved in that. Why we stay ultimately is because we just haven't felt released by the Lord to leave. And over the years, there's been many times where situations have happened, and I'll go home and I was like, I can't go there no more. I can't do this anymore. But God hasn't allowed us to leave. And in that regard, we have had opportunities to have conversations, especially in these last few months, where I really do feel like the Lord is using us to speak prophetically to this issue within the context of our church and to help people when it comes to this in the context of our church. And so that's why we continue to stay.
Bobita, tell us about your first experience at Johnson Ferry, what that was like and how that's led to why you and your family are still here.
When we first came here, my daughter was about 2, I think, and we live not far from here, and we wanted to go to a Christmas Eve service. And we saw on the sign that they were going to have one whatever time it was. And so we said, okay, we're going to go to Johnson Ferry. We'll go to the Christmas Eve service. So we drove up here and we parked and we came in, and this is a huge place, as you know, and we didn't know where we were going. And we were walking around trying to find things like, where's the sanctuary? And so we said, oh, there's a sign. There's a sign that says sanctuary. So we just started following the signs to the sanctuary. There were people who were out in the hallways. They obviously knew we didn't know where we were going, but no one asked us if we needed help. So we just said, well, we'll just follow the signs. So we keep going. We see the sign that says sanctuary, and there are 2 white doors. Not knowing where we were, we just opened the door. And I opened the door, and there must be 800 to 900 white people sitting there, not a black person in sight. And there we are with our toddler. And I looked at my husband and I said, don't make eye contact with anybody. Just head for the back. And we just started racing to the back of the church because we ended up in the front of the sanctuary. It's like, oh my gosh, we're in the front. So I said, just race to the back. So we go to the back of the church, and finally we get back in the narthex, I think that's what it's called. And someone finally said, may I help you? And I said, yes, please help us find a seat. And we sat down and we it was a nice Christmas Eve service. But when we left, we said we would never come back. Said, I will never go back to that church. You know you shouldn't say that because God always has something planned when you say you'll never do something. Yeah. And so several years later, my daughter's in middle school, and we were at another church, and she wasn't joshing with the ministry there, the middle school ministry, and she had started doing cheerleading here at Johnson Ferry. And we said, well, we've been in that building a couple of times since our tragic event, Christmas Eve. Why don't we try it again? And because we've been here almost every day except Sunday with her with cheerleading. So we started coming, and one thing led to another, and we felt that we were called to come here and be a part of the congregation. And as Keith said, we haven't left, because we don't feel that God has released us to leave yet. Whatever the job is that we're supposed to do or whatever he wants us to learn while we're here, we're going to stay here. We have a great community with our Sunday school class. Hey, reach people. We love them. They love us. And we do life together as a Sunday school class, which is great. And I think that has kept us here because we have formed community. I don't think we would have stayed if we hadn't made relationships with other people.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Well, let me use that as a bridge into maybe the other side of that coin, which is that many of you have had challenges as a person of color at Johnson Ferry. And no one likes to admit that because all of us like to think that our church is great and we know we're sinners, but I mean, come on, this is a super loving place, and it is a loving, friendly place. But you've all had some experiences that were really challenging to you in that regard. So would anyone like to share just maybe some of a challenge that you face at Johnson Ferry being a person of color?
Well, I'd like to just start also like, why am I here? My grandfather was a Black Baptist preacher. You also got to understand there was a time that Black Baptists could not join the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yes.
So they had their own national Black Baptist Convention.
Yeah.
So my mother was a preacher's daughter. My mother truly, truly raised us knowing the word. I thought in high school I wanted to be a missionary. I, joined the ministry when I got to LSU, go Tigers. That was not, I ended up doing missions with them. It wasn't a Baptist church. And I started doing a lot of non-denominational churches. And then about 30 or 40, and I am mature, I backslid, and I backslid hard. Like, I was not living for Jesus. I wasn't living for God. I wasn't living for nobody. I was living for myself. I was in sin. And I had hardened my heart to the things of the Lord. And God is gracious. I am that woman from Hosea where he went out and he pursued me. And he wooed me back. And it was very gentle. It was undeserving. His mercies and his grace were there. I really, really love that he loved me. He loved me enough to come after me and pursue me. So the first church I tried to go to was close to my house. I could actually walk there. And I'm sitting in the singles ministry, and the dude that's leading is talking about some woman he'd shack with. I'm like, wait a minute now. Whoa, wait a minute, dude. Wait a minute. Somebody you shack with. And then somebody else came in and was cussing. I'm like, whoa. So I actually wrote the pastor, because you know me. I'll write a pastor in a minute.
I do know that.
Pastor Clay know that. I wrote the pastor and I said, listen, I'm backsliding. And I'm trying to come back to Jesus. And I'm just telling you right now, if I'm going to be sitting somewhere where they talking about they cussing and they talking about who they living with, I said I can go and sit with my girlfriends at a bar and drink some good drinks. And we can have that same conversation. Because I don't need to be sitting in no church trying to pretend like that's what we're doing. I need help. I'm backslidden. So I was at home getting my roof done. And this is only God's divine plan. And a gentleman from here, he does roofs for Home Depot, came, and he was doing some work, and I was telling him that I just couldn't find a church. I wanted to do missions. That whole thing that from my youth where I had wanted to was starting to be boiling up into me again, and I just couldn't find a church. And he says, well, where do you work? And we found out that I knew his brother from working at the hospital I worked at, and he says, well, listen, you're close to the hospital. It's a little bit of a ride from here, but it's close to your hospital, Johnson Ferry Baptist Church. I said, okay, where's it at? And he says, and by the way, if you want to do missions, they'll pay half your way. I was starting my car, even as he was speaking. I'm on my way. I mean, the car was cranked up. I was ready to go, like, hello, I'm coming. So I showed up, had a wonderful greeting by Pete with the red hair. Pete helped me get into the modern service. It was absolutely wonderful. I ended up meeting some wonderfully wonderful people. I'm in a great Sunday school class. Hello, the calling. So great class. Ended up with them, had great relationships. And so about 3 months in, I decided I was going to join the church. And thank goodness I had made relationships. But also, I shared a part of this, but I didn't share the part about the church I had looked at and how I was so hurt that I needed help, that somebody could help somebody that was so backslidden and was in such sin. And I mean, I was living hard. Like, I had my professional life, but I was living hard. And I get a call, and on the voicemail it said, I see that you live in East Point, and I was just wondering, like, why you couldn't find a church closer to your home. You pass up a lot of churches to get here.
Mm.
So I thought, okay, that's racist. And then I asked my niece, because I said, well, maybe I'm just being oversensitive. And so she listened to it, and she said, you're not being oversensitive. But I ignored it. I thought, I'm just being oversensitive. And so I did the whole program with the new members meeting, and then you break off, and you sit down and you talk with someone, and you're talking to someone, and someone says to me, did you get the voicemail? And I was like, yeah. Well, you didn't answer the question. And I'm going to ask you the question again. You couldn't find a church between here and East Point? Because we're trying to build community here. And I was like, well, I just told you this whole story. I told her about the backslidden part. I had told the person about, I didn't tell them about the other church, but I told them about the backslidden part. I told them about, I felt like I wanted to do missions. I told them why I felt like I was called here. And they said, well, we don't need numbers. We're building community here. And thank goodness there was somebody else in the room to witness it. But as you said, somebody else later said to me, they didn't speak up or say anything, but the room got deathly quiet. It was a mixed race couple that was sitting at the end of the conference table. They were both civil rights lawyers. I'll never forget that they told us what they did for a living. It was a black woman and a white man, and there was a Caucasian gentleman sitting there. And this person is talking to me, and I can tell when they realized that everybody's focus had turned, because I was like, you act like you don't want me here. And then the whole demeanor changed. If I had not built some relationships in those 90 days, I'd have left this church. I would have never come back. I would have thought, what? And my heart is, who else might have gotten that same voicemail and never came back? So, like I said, I appreciate the call, and I appreciate the relationships that I had made, because that's the only thing that kept me. Why am I still here? Jesus won't release me. I know y'all might be saying, get her out of here, Pastor. But Jesus ain't let me go yet. And until he tells me it's time to go, I'm going to stay.
That's right.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
That's right.
Kirk, what about you? Any challenges that you faced with Johnson Ferry as a
yeah,
person of
you
color?
know, I first came here because when we bought our home, our agent, my insurance agent, told me, well, you know, you just bought this house, and it's right around the corner from this church, Johnson Ferry. It's a great church. You should check it out. And I said, sure, we want to be fellowshipped. We didn't want to be outside. We had just had our daughter, Sarah Beth, and she was 2.5 months premature, so she was fragile. But we still wanted to get plugged into a church home, and so something that was close was important to us. So without any thought, we showed up here, and for at least 4 months, we would go sit up in the balcony with her diodes and things like. We had to monitor her breathing because her lungs were still forming, and so we would sit up there. And then finally, we started coming to Wednesday night supper, and we sat there for a good 6-8 weeks, and people would walk right by us without saying a word, nothing, and as though we were invisible. There's my wife, Angela, myself, and our little daughter in a carrier with all kinds of electrical equipment hooked up to her. I mean, she looked like a mixing board from a rap album. So anyway, we were just sitting there and we were wondering, well, maybe this isn't the place for us. And it dawned on me to actually look up what it was that we were attending. And had I known it was a Southern Baptist church, I would not have darkened the door. Because as my grandfather pestered me when I was driving him from Texas to California for 2,000 miles, you're a deacon at what kind of church? Because for him, Southern Baptist had a specific history and connotation that we weren't welcome. But God has a way of taking those expectations and those stereotypes and turning up on their head. And a retired Marine, Henry Holly, made all the difference for us because he walked over with a cup of coffee in his hand one Wednesday night, and because of my haircut, he thought I was a fellow Marine, and I said no, but my father was in the Army for 25 years. Does that count? And he says, well, that'll have to do. And he asked if we had been plugged in, and we said, no, sir. And he said, well, you need, talking to me, you need to come to my men's class. And Angela, my wife, Betty, has a women's class. And that's how we got plugged in. And so what I hear here is that relationships saved the day for many of us who were not having good experiences, but because we had relationships, people of faith who reached out and made these relationships, made it possible for us to stay. God brought us in the door, and then he moved the hearts of people to secure our place here through the relationships we've had with people. Because the one thing I don't want people to think is, oh, people of color, they have nothing but bad experiences. No, we don't. It's when those bad experiences occur, they have a traumatic effect. But what overcomes that, and I'll forever be grateful,
Relationships.
is the relationship. Because of Henry Holly,
That's right.
like I said, we've been here for 24 years. But I will say, because of those relationships, right after that, he invited me to a men's prayer meeting in the fellowship hall, and they were singing hymns, and me, I don't know why, I'd never done this before, but I raised my hands in celebration, and I remember thereafter a man came up to me, he says, why would a Muslim come to a Christian prayer breakfast? And I said, I don't know. I thought there was a punchline coming. I don't know. Why would he? You know, why did the chicken cross the road? Why would a Muslim? And he said, so then why are you here?
Oh my goodness.
And I said, oh, you're talking to me as the Muslim. And I said, I don't know. Why am I here? Because I was quite confused. And I remember a man in the class that I was attending, Bob Wood, said, oh, Kirk's a deacon here. And the man said, you are? And I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, so why are you doing Muslim-y things? And I can only think of is, I don't know. It's my nature. I don't know. But again, Bob Wood wasn't just not a racist. He was anti-racist. He says, hold on, I know this man. What you're saying to him is wrong. Henry Holly, I know people are walking by you, but you deserve being paid attention to. Hello, who are you? Why are you here? And how can I help you get plugged in?
Yeah.
And that's the good thing about Johnson Ferry. Out of 8,000 people, you're going to find at least one who's going to help you get plugged in because they are true followers of Christ.
That's right.
Final question, and I'd like for you all to share. What is your hope for the future of Johnson Ferry? When we think about this conversation, when we think about this biblical design of a church for all peoples, what is your hope as you think about the future of Johnson Ferry?
My hope would be that when people of color come to the church, it wouldn't just be an accident. That they would come here because they've heard from someone that this is a place that loves Jesus and is going to love you when you come there. That we're not going to be treated as visitors all the time when we walk through the door. That's one of my main things that gets me sometimes about being a member here. I've been here, 7 years? And sometimes people still act as if I'm a visitor coming through the door. Been here. I'm not new. And not to make the assumption that just because a person of color walks through the door, that they need help. We're coming to church just like you are. All of us don't need to come and get financial assistance. Or we're not coming to fill out a form to get food. That's okay if that's what you need to do, but just don't make that assumption about a person of color, be they black, Asian, Hispanic, or whatever. Don't make that assumption that that's what's coming just because we walk through the door.
Um, I've been in some churches that have been diverse, and I think one of the things I can remember, and I was in my 20s here in Atlanta. One of the first churches I went to.
Till last year.
Yes, thank you,
Okay, all right, all right.
thank you, good job.
All right.
The thing that I really loved was that it was it was all ethnicities, and it wasn't just black, white. It was all ethnicities. We were all so in tune with loving Jesus, that a lot of barriers broke down. And honest to goodness, I think a lot of times people are just frightened, and so they don't. If you don't have anybody black in your neighborhood, or you really don't really associate with black people, you might be a little bit scared, or somebody that doesn't look like you. But I think once a lot of us got to know each other, it really helped me understand who they were.
Right.
It gives you grace for that person because you really have a
Right.
relationship. It helps build that. What I would hope for is that there will be a time when, all the staff will not be white with like maybe one person of color. That, you'll have a choir that looks like like a colored, beautiful, diverse background, and that there will be people sitting out in the audience that look not like you, that there's so much diversity. But also with diversity, there comes pain, because anything with change and difference, there's a lot that you have to work through. And if you want a multicultural church, it's a lot. It's a lot for the membership. It's a lot for you as a pastor. It's a lot for everyone, because we have to extend grace to each other as that growth and that difference in the, getting to know somebody different. Not, in undivided class, when Dahati and J.D. Greer are saying, we're not saying we want a multi, what is it, Brian? A multi,
Not a multicolor church.
right,
Yeah,
but a multi,
ethnic.
right,
Yeah.
where you don't want somebody that's going to make you feel comfortable. So, but you want something that it allows for the person to be who they are in their culture and their background.
Yeah, my hope is that just as a church that we would reflect the kingdom, whatever that looks like for us. And maybe that does mean that we're more multicultural, but maybe it doesn't. That's in God's hands. He's going to add to our number the way he sees fit. But ultimately, as a church, we need to be committed to understanding and loving each other the way Scripture calls us to. And that's a kingdom mindset. Heaven does not have an East Cobb section. Right? It doesn't. Heaven, as we have discussed already, is going to be multi-ethnic, a gathering of people from every nation, tribe, and tongue that are going to be there together praising Jesus. And we need to model that here as a church. And so I hope that we can do that well. And I know we do, but I hope that we continue to do that no matter what our makeup looks like.
My hope is that in these discussions, whether they're in group settings like this or one-on-one, that we uphold the standard of the gospel in those discussions, rather than sink to social, political, or cultural norms, and not stage battles based on those norms, but rather, as Keith said, model what we know is a glorious future, where we'll all be singing with one voice in praise of the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And we can have, in that sense, heaven on earth right here every Sunday, every Wednesday, and every time we gather together. And my hope is that with this discussion, it doesn't become one where you've got to protect or defend your upbringing, but rather you're proclaiming the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And in such, we will find common ground, because the only reason why any of us are here ostensibly is for that reason. So we don't need to deny that this exists out there, but we certainly need to behave differently here, so that others might see there is a different way to have this discussion and a different way to socialize, other than Well, because I was brought up in California, there's a Californian way. And because you were brought up in South Carolina, there's a South Carolina way. There's God's way. And we need to model that. And I'm hoping that through discussions like this and other discussions, that this church will come to not just exemplify that, proclaim it as a way that Movita just said, that others will come expecting that rather than dreading, what will I see, what will I experience,
Yeah.
that might
Yeah.
replicate what I already see on the street right outside on Woodlawn. No, when you come here, let this be a sanctuary for God's way in his word to have its preeminence. And when we all then shout and honor him for what his spirit is doing through us for that, and not take any credit for it ourselves.
And you can edit this out, but
Maybe that sweatshirt he can edit out.
oh, don't mess with the sweatshirt. I just want to say this so that that I'm clear. I do not believe that love negates justice, and I don't believe God's biblical word negates justice. You cannot have love and not love justice.
Yeah.
To me, they are linked together.
Yes.
And I think sometimes when we talk about love, it's that great, by and by, and it sounds great, but we don't see that there's also something where if you're an anti-racist, your love also loves justice, so you're going to speak up. You're going to do the right thing. So that's just
Well, thank you for your candor in this conversation. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your hearts and your humor. And really just the role that you're playing to fulfill what is a calling from God, to help us to reflect the kingdom of God. And we are a better church because of you who are on the stage and many others who are speaking into this issue with a Jesus first mentality. So thank you, and thank you for watching this today. I hope this has been beneficial and helpful to you, and we look forward to the conversation continuing and to seeing our church continue to love and worship God as we reach and disciple people for Jesus Christ.